What's up, Green and White Nation? Something is clearly brewing inside the Philadelphia Eagles organization right now, and if you've been paying close attention to the signals coming out of the front office, you can feel that this isn't just another quiet offseason. This is the kind of moment where things shift, where a contender decides whether it's going to stay competitive or go all in. Because according to Adam Schefter, there's a growing belief around the league that Howie Roseman is actively plotting a major move during draft weekend. And here's the part that should really grab your attention. This wouldn't be out of character at all. Over the last 5 years, Roseman has made between 20 and 25 trades. That's not aggressive, that's calculated chaos. That's a GM who thrives in moments like this. And now, league executives are expecting him to strike again. So the question becomes, who could be the target? One name that keeps surfacing is Jonathan Greenard. The Vikings have already placed him on the trade block, largely due to financial pressure, being more than $40 million over their preferred cap structure earlier this offseason. Greenard still has 2 years left on his deal, but he's looking for a new contract, and when you look at his production, it's easy to see why. We're talking about a player who posted 5 sacks 3 years ago, followed that up with 12 more the next season, and even in a down year impacted by injuries, remained highly effective, especially against the run. Now imagine plugging that into a Philadelphia defense that clearly needs reinforcement on the edge. This isn't just about adding depth, this is about restoring dominance in the pass rush. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The Vikings are reportedly asking for a day 2 pick. The Eagles? They have multiple day 2 picks available. That's where things start to align a little too perfectly. But Greenard might not be the only swing. There's also the possibility, however bold, of a move for Myles Garrett. After a historic 2025 season where he broke the sack record, the Browns adjusted the language in his contract, which quietly made a potential trade more realistic than people expected. Now, is it likely? That's a different conversation, but is it possible? Absolutely. And if you're trying to fix one of the biggest weaknesses on this Eagles roster, you don't think small, you think transformative. Then there's the secondary. The Eagles lost Reed Blankenship, and while Andrew Makuba has already been present at offseason workouts, there's still a clear gap that needs to be addressed. That's where Budda Baker comes into play. A veteran, a proven playmaker, and someone who has spent years in Arizona without consistently competing at a high level. You bring him into Philadelphia, into a winning environment, and suddenly you're not just filling a hole, you're upgrading the entire identity of your defense. And then there's the wild card, Kyle Pitts. This one ties directly into another storyline that's been hovering over this team, the uncertain future of A.J. Brown. If the Eagles do end up moving Brown, the offense will need to evolve. And Pitts, still in his mid-20s and currently playing under the franchise tag, could be that chess piece that changes everything. He's not a traditional tight end, he's a weapon. Pair him with Dallas Goedert, and suddenly you're looking at more 2 tight end sets, more versatility, and a completely different offensive structure. And let's not overlook the financial angle. Pitts would come at a fraction of the cost compared to A.J. Brown, while still offering elite upside as a pass catcher. Meanwhile, away from all the trade speculation, there's something else happening that should fire up this fan base. Jalen Hurts is putting in serious work this offseason, and not in some luxury facility far away from the spotlight. He's been training in North Philadelphia at Temple University. That matters. That says something about his mindset. This is a quarterback embracing the city, embracing the grit, putting himself in an environment that demands toughness. And people close to Hurts keep repeating the same thing. When he's motivated, when he feels doubted, that's when you get the best version of him. After all the noise, all the criticism, even narratives questioning whether he's coachable, which frankly don't line up with reality considering he continues to work with respected coaches like Scott Loeffler and Quincy Avery. This offseason feels personal for him. He knows what's being said.
And it looks like he's getting ready to answer. So now everything connects. A potentially aggressive front office, multiple high-impact trade targets, a quarterback with something to prove, and a roster with clear gaps, but also massive upside if the right moves are made. The Eagles aren't sitting still. They're positioning themselves for something. The only question is, how big is this move going to be? And which of these names do you think actually becomes reality for Philadelphia? And if you really connect all the dots here, it starts to feel less like speculation and more like a calculated setup for something significant. Because when Howie Roseman operates like this, quietly stacking assets, holding multiple day 2 picks, and letting information leak just enough to stir the league, it usually means one thing: he already has a framework in place. Think about the timing. Draft weekend isn't just about selecting rookies, it's when leverage peaks. Teams get desperate, boards fall apart, and that's when someone like Roseman strikes. He's done it before, and based on everything coming out right now, other executives around the NFL are bracing for it again. Now go back to the names we talked about, because each one tells you something about the direction this team could take. If the move ends up being for Jonathan Greenard, that signals a focus on fixing the pass rush without completely blowing up the salary structure. It's aggressive, but still controlled. You're adding a proven edge rusher who can produce immediately, without committing to the kind of massive contract that reshapes your entire cap. But if somehow the Eagles pull off something involving Myles Garrett, then we're talking about a completely different level of intent. That's not just filling a need, that's sending a message to the entire league that Philadelphia is going all in to dominate defensively. A move like that doesn't just elevate your roster, it changes how every opponent prepares for you. And then there's the secondary scenario. If Budda Baker becomes the target, it shows awareness. It shows that this front office understands the importance of balance. You've already invested heavily in the defensive line over the years. Now you bring in a veteran leader on the back end to tie everything together. That's how complete defenses are built. But the most fascinating path might still be on offense. Because if A.J. Brown is truly part of these discussions, then this isn't just a roster tweak, it's a philosophical shift. Moving on from a player of his caliber forces you to rethink everything. And that's where Kyle Pitts becomes more than just a replacement. He becomes a symbol of a new identity. Imagine an offense where Jalen Hurts is operating with multiple tight end looks, where mismatches are created across the middle of the field, where speed and size are used differently. Pitts isn't asked to block like a traditional tight end. That's where Dallas Goedert comes in. Pitts stretches the field, attacks linebackers, forces safeties into impossible decisions. It's not the same offense, it's a redesigned one. And while all of this is unfolding behind the scenes, Hurts is still out there grinding, still working in North Philly, still preparing like a player who knows this season is going to define narratives around him. The criticism, the questions about his leadership, the doubts about his coachability, they haven't disappeared. If anything, they've fueled him. That's what makes this moment so important, because you have a front office potentially ready to make a blockbuster move, and a quarterback who seems locked in, motivated, and ready to respond. When those two things align, that's when teams take real leaps. But here's the reality. Not every rumor turns into a deal. Not every plan survives the chaos of draft weekend. And sometimes, the biggest move is the one nobody saw coming. That's why this situation feels different. It's unpredictable, but it's also building towards something. So now it comes down to you. If you're sitting in that war room, if you're making the call alongside Howie Roseman, which direction are you taking this team? Are you going all in on defense with a name like Myles Garrett, reinforcing the edge with Jonathan Greenard, stabilizing the secondary with Budda Baker, or completely reshaping the offense with Kyle Pitts? Because the more you sit with this situation, the more you realize this isn't just about one move. It's about defining the next era of the Philadelphia Eagles. Everything we've talked about, every rumor, every potential trade target, every report tied to Howie Roseman, it all points to a front office that understands exactly where this roster stands. Not rebuilding, not standing still, but right in that critical window where one bold decision can separate a playoff team from a true Super Bowl contender. And that's why the stakes feel so high right now. If the Eagles stay conservative, if they simply use their draft picks and avoid taking a swing, they're betting on internal development. They're trusting that players already in the building will take that next step. There's logic in that approach, but it doesn't create fear across the league. A move for someone like Myles Garrett, that creates fear. A calculated addition like Jonathan Greenard, that strengthens a weakness without overcommitting. A veteran presence like Budda Baker, that stabilizes the defense and adds leadership where it's needed most. And a bold offensive pivot involving Kyle Pitts, that changes how this entire team operates on Sundays. Each path leads to a different version of the Eagles. And right now, it feels like all of those paths are still on the table. But don't overlook the most important factor in all of this, Jalen Hurts. Because no matter what move is made, no matter which star potentially arrives, this team will go as far as Hurts takes them. And everything we're seeing this offseason suggests that he's approaching this year with a different kind of edge. Training in tough environments, staying connected with coaches who believe in him, continuing to refine his game. This isn't preparation. This is intentional. This is a quarterback who knows the narrative and is preparing to flip it. Now imagine that version of Hurts paired with a front office that actually delivers on one of these major moves. That's when things get dangerous. That's when expectations rise. That's when Philadelphia stops being just a good team and starts being viewed as a problem for the entire NFL. But here's the twist. The Eagles have built a reputation for doing the unexpected. So even with all these names circulating, there's still a real chance that the move they make isn't any of the ones we've been discussing. It could be someone flying completely under the radar. Someone who fits their system perfectly. Someone who, a few months from now, everyone looks back on and says, that's when everything changed. And if that happens, it won't be luck. It'll be another example of Howie Roseman playing chess while everyone else is reacting. So as we get closer to draft weekend, keep your eyes open. Watch the moves, watch the signals, watch how this front office operates. Because when it happens, and it feels like it's going to happen, it's going to shift the trajectory of this team in a big way. And there's one more layer to all of this that can't be ignored. Because while the spotlight is on potential trades and big-name targets, what's really happening behind the scenes is a test of identity. What kind of team do the Philadelphia Eagles want to be in 2026? Because every decision from Howie Roseman from this point forward answers that question. If he pushes chips to the center of the table, then this is a team that believes its championship window is wide open right now. If he holds back and plays it safe, then maybe the organization sees this as more of a transitional year. But based on everything we've laid out so far, does this really feel like a front office preparing to play it safe? It doesn't, and that's why the anticipation keeps building. Around the league, executives are watching closely. Inside the fan base, expectations are rising. And inside that locker room, players know that something could be coming that changes everything. Now bring it back to Jalen Hurts for a second, because this is where the story becomes personal. A quarterback who has dealt with scrutiny, criticism, and constant evaluation, now potentially stepping into a season where the roster around him could either be elevated to elite status or reshaped entirely. That kind of pressure breaks some players. But for others, it creates their best football. And everything we've seen from Hurts suggests he's preparing for the second option. So if you combine that mindset with a possible defensive upgrade like Myles Garrett or Jonathan Greenard, suddenly the Eagles aren't just competitive, they're imposing. They dictate games. They control tempo. They make life miserable for opposing quarterbacks. If the move instead targets the secondary with Buda Baker, then you're looking at a defense that becomes smarter, faster, and more disciplined in key moments. And if everything shifts offensively, if Kyle Pitts enters the picture while Dallas Goedert continues to handle the physical side of the position, you're not just replacing production, you're redefining how this offense attacks defenses. Different paths, same goal, win at the highest level. But here's what makes this moment so compelling. The Eagles don't have to make a move. They're choosing whether to, and that choice is what separates good organizations from great ones. Knowing when to be aggressive, knowing when to take a risk, knowing when the opportunity in front of you is too important to pass up. Right now, all signs point to this being one of those moments. So as everything builds toward draft weekend, don't just focus on the names being reported. Focus on the pattern. Focus on the behavior. Focus on the history of a general manager who has shown time and time again that he's willing to do what others won't. Because when that move finally drops, and it feels closer than ever, it's going to tell us exactly who the Philadelphia Eagles are heading into 2026. Are they a team that believes it's already close, or a team that's about to make sure nobody can catch them? And the deeper you go into this situation, the clearer it becomes that this isn't just about adding talent. It's about timing, conviction, and reading the league better than everyone else. Because when Howie Roseman decides to act, it's rarely reactive. It's usually because he sees something forming before the rest of the NFL fully catches on. That's what makes this moment dangerous, in a good way for Philadelphia. Look at the landscape. Teams across the league are trying to balance their cap, figure out